I don't know about you guys, but I am such a bookworm. I love a rainy day and getting cozy with a new book. I even love the smell of books. And of course, mystery or thrillers are my go to, but finding the time to sit down and actually read them, that's the real mystery. So, as much as I love the feel and smell of a good page turner, I also love Audible. You can listen to thousands of audiobooks, podcasts, and originals while doing literally anything. And the best part, your entire library goes with you. True crime, paranormal deep dives, thrillers, memoirs, whatever your brain may be craving, Audible probably has it. Start listening today by grabbing your free Audible trial through the link in my show notes. With an Audible membership, you get 1 credit every month to download any audiobook you want to keep for free, plus unlimited listening to thousands of podcasts and Audible originals with Audible Standard. So whether you're driving, cleaning, walking the dog, cooking dinner, or spiraling down a late night true crime rabbit hole again, your next story can go with you. Start a free trial today, download the Audible app, and begin listening in minutes. Just check the link in my show notes to get started. Your next obsession is waiting. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is Suspects and Spirits, and I'm your host, Taylor Seraphin. And I just ate the best Dubai chocolate of my whole life. It was Lindt Dubai chocolate, the ginormous, the big ass ones. So good. Anyways, guys, I've unlocked a new fear, a brand new fear. So, as I've mentioned before, I'm basically in love with Hayley Williams, and I'm going to see her very, very soon. I'm counting down the days. I'm so fucking excited. I've been dreaming of this day since I was like 12 years old. Okay, I'm so stoked to see her. But TikTok has now just completely unleashed a brand new fear of mine. I told my husband, I want to be right up front. I want to be up front, center in the action. I've been waiting my whole life to see this goddess perform. And then I saw a video of this girl who's basically saying the same thing, right? The text on the screen said, I've been waiting my whole life to see Hayley Williams. And then it's her at the concert, and she said, still waiting my whole life to see Hayley Williams. And the whole video is just her stuck behind a bunch of tall people, and she can't see Hayley. So she's there at the concert, still waiting her whole life to see Miss Williams. And in parentheses, it says, I'm 5'1". No, no, you guys. I am 5 foot and no inches. And now I have this new fear. I've never had to really worry about this before because other venues I've been to, the stage is it's like high enough that if I'm on the floor, I can manage. My neck hurts afterward, but I'm fine. But this venue, it's very intimate, it's very small. And Hayley, she's not a giant either. Okay. She's real tiny. So I'm like, well, fuck. Now I need to either wear platform shoes to this concert or get there hella early. Like just sit outside with an umbrella, drinking water and tears and sweating through my shirt. I really hope my husband realizes that this is going to be the reality. I will line up at 4 p.m. for a 7 p.m. show so that I don't have to stare at the back of someone's head. Like I'm not doing it. I'm not. My husband, he's like 6'3", 6'4"-ish. So worst case scenario, I can just like have him give me the play-by-play, I guess, or I can just hop on his shoulders. Oh my God. Could you imagine just up on his shoulders like a toddler at Disneyland who doesn't want to walk anymore? Being short sucks sometimes, but maybe, I don't know, maybe it can come in handy. Like I can wiggle my way up front. I don't know. Wish me luck, you guys. If I have to stare at the back of someone's head, I'm gonna be real upset. I'm gonna be very sad. So, I mean, sure, yeah, I'm there for the music. Her voice is mesmerizing. I could listen to her literally all day. I actually have done that. But I want the whole experience. Like that's the whole point of a concert. You know, you want to see them live, not just hear them. So, and she's such a vibe. Oh my God. So, if anyone has advice for us short folks when it comes to these situations, I'd appreciate it. Us hobbits would love some advice. So that's where my head's at these days. And as much as I know you probably love to hear all about my major girl crush on Hayley Williams and being short, you definitely want me to get into the story, and I'm gonna do that. So buckle up. Today's story is very, very disturbing. Pretty disturbing. I'd actually never heard of it. It's also sort of, I guess you could say, controversial due to the age of the perpetrator. in this case and how it became kind of like a social media sensation. And when I say that, I mean a meme. She became a meme, which is really fucked up. But these things, they do happen and they're important to talk about. So let's get into it. This one's probably going to be a bit on the shorter side, like me, but that is because this story doesn't necessarily feel complete. And that is because certain laws that were put into place in order to protect the people in the story. So, yeah, there are some stories that feel complete. You can follow them from beginning to end. You can understand the people involved. You can trace the decisions that led to the tragedy. And then there are stories like this one, stories that just kind of exist in fragments where the truth is intentionally hidden, protected by the law, sealed away because of the age of the people involved. And what fills that silence is everything else: rumors, names, theories, entire identities built out of speculation. This is one of those cases because at the center of it are an 11-year-old girl and a 12-year-old girl, one of whose life was taken and one that the law has protected from being overexposed. This is the story of the Sasebo schoolgirl murder. Now, I will say this is a foreign case. This happened in Sasebo, Japan in 2004. So I will do my very, very best with pronunciations of these names. Don't come for me if I say it wrong, but please kindly correct me if need be. Today, we are discussing the murder of 12-year-old Satomi Matari, a case that unfortunately became an internet sensation in the early 2000s, but not for the reasons you might think. This wasn't driven by a widespread outcry for justice. So, why did this story spread the way it did? Because the person responsible in this case was just 11 years old. Her identity has never been officially released, though online she's often identified as Natsumi Tuji. And this is a name that was never confirmed due to Japanese juvenile privacy laws. But once the internet got a hold of this case, the name and the story surrounding it, it took on a whole life of its own. So some of you guys, especially my millennial friends, might know her instead as Nevada Tan. But because I don't believe in sensationalizing the death of children or anyone for that matter, we need to start with the victim, Satomi Matari, because in cases like this, especially ones that spread online like wildfire and just take on a life of their own, the victim can get lost in the shock of what happened, which is unfortunate, but it's also human. You know, people, we become morbidly fascinated with the perpetrators, right? Like what made them do it? What's their backstory? We just want to know. But we don't know a whole lot in this case. What we do know about Satomi, the victim, is pretty limited, not because she didn't have a full life, but because in Japan, especially in cases involving minors, privacy is protected in a way that keeps those details out of public view. Something that westernized culture is not very familiar with. We just put it all on blast. So instead of a detailed biography, we're left with more consistent impressions. What we do know about Satomi is that she was described as a very friendly, very outgoing, and social child, the kind of kid who got along easily with others, the kind of student that teachers didn't really worry about. She was a rule follower, someone you would expect to come back to class after lunch. But that expectation is exactly what caused the teachers to go looking for her. But when they did, it would be too late. On June 1st, 2004, at Akobu Elementary School in Sasebo, Japan, the school day began like any other. Students arrived, classes continued, routines played out exactly as they always had. There was nothing that outwardly signaled what was about to happen. At some point during the day, allegedly around lunchtime, Satomi was approached by a classmate, someone she had been friends with, and this classmate asked her to come with her to an empty classroom. It's rumored that she was lured there under false pretenses. What those were, we're not really sure, but maybe the classmate said that, she needed to talk to her or show her something. And there was nothing unusual about that on its own. Students step away all the time, especially sixth grade girls. They step away to chat, to grab something, to go with one another to the bathroom. But this was very different because once those two girls stepped into the empty classroom, everything changed. This was not just a quick chat or retrieving a forgotten item. The classmate, who we will be referring to as Natsumi, had somehow gotten her hands on a box cutter. And once she got Satomi alone in that empty classroom, she brutally attacked her, stabbing her multiple times, leaving fatal wounds primarily to her neck. And this was seemingly out of nowhere. The violence of what happened stood in stark contrast to the normalcy that surrounded it just moments before. And the act itself was not drawn out. There was no long period where anyone realized something was wrong. It all happened very, very quickly. Natsumi attacked Satomi and then left the classroom and returned to her own, re-entering the same environment as if nothing had happened. And for a brief moment, the rest of the school just continued on, completely unaware of what had just taken place behind a closed door. It wasn't until Satomi didn't return to class after lunch that something began to feel very off. A teacher noticed her absence and they were like, that's very strange. Satomi follows the rules. She comes to class. She didn't get signed out. Where did she go? A couple of students had mentioned seeing Satomi enter an empty classroom following another classmate, but they didn't see who the classmate was. They just saw Satomi and where she was going. So the teacher went to check it out. And when they opened that door, the reality of what had happened became immediately clear. What had been an ordinary school day and just looking for a student shifted in an instant into something unimaginable. Satomi had been found on the floor of the classroom, suffering severe knife wounds to the neck, several of them. The exact number is not reported on, but it was very brutal. She was bleeding profusely, but was remarkably still alive. The discovery of Satomi's body triggered an immediate emergency response. Staff and students were thrown into confusion and shock as the situation unfolded. Police were called, and the school quickly became the center of an investigation. Who had done this to this poor girl? Satomi was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately, she passed away from her injuries. I know, it's so awful. That's someone's baby. Like, stories like this they get me. Like, how could they not? I think of my own kids and it just hurts my heart. Like, kids should be able to trust other kids, you know? You should never have to worry about children hurting other children, but unfortunately, that's just not the world we live in. And that's why we tell these stories. So it quickly became very clear that this was not an outside threat. There had been no intruder, no unknown person entering the campus. The source of what had happened was still inside the school itself. So obviously, the attention turned to the students. And not long after questioning a few classmates, police found that 11-year-old classmate, known as Natsumi Tuji, was responsible for this horrific crime. They took her into custody immediately, and from that moment forward, her identity was sealed. Now, you might be asking yourself, if her identity is sealed, where did that name come from? And don't worry, we're going to get into that. In Japan, where violent crime among children is exceptionally rare, the story became front-page news nationwide. But her real name has never been officially released, and that's not an accident. It's the law. Japanese media does not publish the identities of juvenile defenders, even in serious cases. So officially, she remains anonymous. What we do know is that she was 11 years old and is referred to as Natsumi Tuji. She was a fellow sixth grade student and had sat in the same classroom as Satomi just before the murder occurred. So these girls were not strangers crossing paths for the first time. They shared the same space day after day. But somewhere within that shared world, something shifted. And this is where the story becomes less solid and more blurry, because what comes next exists in two layers: what is confirmed and what is widely reported but never fully verified. We do know that the girls knew each other, but to what extent, we're not entirely sure. Many accounts suggest that they may have been friends, or at least friendly classmates, and repeated reports mention that tension began to build between the girls, much of it tied to online interactions. Now remember, this was the early 2000s. Facebook had just taken off, YouTube was just about to launch, and personal websites and blogs were becoming more and more common, especially among teens and young adults. And for many young people, those spaces became extensions of their social lives. If you've listened to this podcast for more than 5 minutes, you already know my nervous system lives on the edge. That's why I love RYZE. Between being a mom, a teacher, and a full time researcher of all things sinister and spooky, I need energy that doesn't come with anxiety. My therapist says I have plenty of that already, which is why I love to start my day with RYZE. RYZE is a mushroom coffee blend that gives me focus without the jitters, and it actually helps me quiet my ADHD brain. It lifts my brain fog and somehow even made my gut health way better. We love a multitasking beverage. I usually drink it in the morning before I sit down to research or record, and it helps me stay clear headed instead of wired. I like to add a little cacao powder, a sprinkle of cinnamon, and of course, my favorite creamer. Then suddenly, it's a delightful little cup of emotional stability. RYZE isn't just coffee, it's gut health and nutrition that your body actually craves. With lion's mane, cordyceps, reishi, shiitake, and turkey tail, you'll be saying, "Holy shiitake, I can actually focus," because these mushrooms help maintain focus throughout the day, they help maintain your stress levels, and they even boost immunity while clearing up that pesky brain fog. So if you're trying to kick your caffeine habit or you just want something that's genuinely better for your nervous system, head to the link in the show notes and use my code suspectsandspiritspodcast 15 to get 15% off your first purchase. What have you got to lose? Again, that's Suspects and Spirits Podcast 15 to get 15% off your first purchase. Your lizard brain will thank you. According to multiple sources, Natsumi maintained a personal website where she wrote about her thoughts and her experiences and sometimes shared her art. And somewhere within that digital space, there were comments, interactions that, depending on the source you ask, were often seen as teasing her, bullying her about what she was sharing online. Unfortunately, there's no fully verified record of exactly what was said, what transpired, but the internet is a cruel place, especially in 2004, so I can believe it and I can only imagine what was said to her. Teachers and students would later describe Natsumi as very quiet, intelligent, and even gifted with computers. It's actually reported that she had an IQ of 140 and had once been very active in school. Some reports even said that she played for the school's basketball team but quit because her mother believed it was interfering with her schoolwork. According to close sources, Natsumi had not just developed a fascination with blogging and personal websites, but also a fascination with the darker corners of internet culture. She often visited gory shock sites and enjoyed reading very violent manga, which, for those of you who don't know, manga are Japanese comic books or graphic novels. I've heard it pronounced manga and manga. I think it's manga. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But Natsumi became deeply entrenched in this. She also became almost addicted to interacting with commenters online. Both kind and not so kind comments were left on her site, and she would respond. Now, as adults, we know responding only adds fuel to fire, but she was 11 and she didn't know any better. And for weeks, it is alleged that she had actually been arguing with Satomi online, exchanging hurtful comments that grew increasingly intense. Small quarrels that started on message boards turned into real animosity, and Natsumi carried that anger with her into the classroom day after day until she snapped. And that's why kids should not have social media. Well, amongst other things. Kids don't belong online interacting with people. Okay? It's a predator's playground, and beyond that it can be extremely damaging to their self-esteem or their idea of reality, depending on what they're into. Now, does that excuse her behavior? Absolutely not. No, it does not. Does violent manga or morbid interest make someone a killer? No, it doesn't. And we have discussed this before. I love horror. I love gory slasher films. I love it all. But it does not make a killer. Okay? I truly can't stand when people blame like video games, movies, or books for people's behavior. Those things can be consumed without being glorified. It's fiction. And as long as the person viewing it knows that it's fake and purely for entertainment or artistic purposes, because, some art is dark, it is probably fine. It's when they cross that line into obsession and it begins to blend into their reality. That's when it becomes concerning. And for some people, a lot of it has to do with nature. And I know we've discussed nature versus nurture before, tale as old as time. And a lot of the time, it is a combination of the two that creates this sort of monster. But I really think a lot of it leans heavily on nature. There has to be a part of someone's brain or chemical makeup that causes them to act on those impulses. But let's talk more about what we officially know about Natsumi. So, what we know is very minimal, as I said. Beyond being an 11-year-old student, most descriptions come from secondary reports and they can't necessarily be confirmed. What is confirmed is that after her arrest, she underwent psychological evaluation, and the case sparked widespread discussion in Japan about youth behavior, the influence of the internet, and how children process conflict and emotion. Because this wasn't just shocking, it's like impossibly difficult to comprehend. How could a child do this, right? A crime of this magnitude committed by somebody so young forced people to confront questions that didn't have simple answers, and they still don't. But then this story took a turn because as official information stopped being reported, the internet did its thing. Okay, it started filling in the gaps. Online communities began to speculate and to search for answers. That's just what our brain does. We try to piece together an identity that had been deliberately withheld. Eventually, the name Natsumi Tuji surfaced, and along with it came photographs, background stories, personality descriptions, an entire narrative constructed around somebody that the public was never meant to identify in the first place. Now, again, I can't really blame these people for wanting to know. That is very Western of us. I get it. But it went too far because as we know, the internet is a sad, desolate utopia for trolls and incels who think women should smile at them more, and also memes. And that is where the term Nevada Tan comes into play. You see, this case, as it unfolded in real time, television cameras surrounded the school. So when this was happening, it was widely covered. And reporters actually captured a photo of a young girl being led away from the school. At the time, she was wearing a University of Nevada sweatshirt with the word Nevada printed boldly across the front. And so on the internet, particularly in Japanese forums like 2chan, that one image became an obsession. Memes, fan art, even songs were made about Nevada tan. And in my research, I found that the suffix tan is kind of like a childish variation of chan, which is a term of endearment. But here it carried a very chilling irony. This weird internet culture fueled the story's global spread. And then suddenly, the case wasn't just a tragedy in Sasebo, it became one of the first viral examples of a true crime story being twisted into online folklore. And that's where we get the name Natsumi Tuji, because it is said that people figured out who she was and they released her identity. Now, this has never been confirmed. We don't know if that's true, but that's what the rumor mill says. And in a way, the internet immortalized Natsumi far beyond any courtroom could have done. And now, after this very horrific tragedy, the Japanese justice system faced a difficult challenge. At 11 years old, Natsumi was below the standard age of criminal responsibility in many countries. But Japan had actually lowered its juvenile threshold after another high profile case in the 90s, which meant that Natsumi could be held legally accountable for her crime. Now, most Americans might say, hell yeah, brother, hold her accountable. And in a way, yes, like she does need to be held accountable for her actions. Duh, she killed somebody. No shit. But we don't know the full story. We don't know if there was mental illness. We don't know what her home life was like. And none of that excuses her behavior. Let me say that again, because I know I'll have people in my DMs arguing with me about how I'm excusing her. No, I'm fucking not. Shut up. I am saying that there's always a reason for the behavior. We don't know what was going on. She's 11. So instead of throwing her into prison, after psychological evaluation, she was placed in a reformatory rather than a traditional prison with the goal of rehabilitation rather than punishment. We don't do that here. I know other countries do. I know Canada does. I mean, it's a case by case basis. Like I said, in some cases, I'm like, no, I don't think they can be rehabilitated. One case that comes to mind is Paris Bennett. That case was horrific, like so horrible and deliberate. It was deliberate. I also think about Maddie Clifton, that poor baby girl. And then he hid her in there and he pretended to search for her. Like it just, there are cases where I feel that sometimes it's a lost cause. I hate to say that, but I do feel that way. Um, but this one, we don't know enough. I don't know enough about it to make a final decision. I don't know what her, diagnosis was, any of that. Now, after this little mishap with, the television camera surrounding the school and capturing a quick photo of her in her sweater, officials never released her face publicly again, like ever. And her identity was very tightly guarded after the initial media frenzy. The case triggered a very intense debate in Japan. Could someone so young truly understand the consequences of such an act? Was Natsumi a child in need of help, or was she an early example of dangerous psychopathy? Parents worried about internet culture, violent media, and of course, bullying. So, schools doubled down on safety protocols, and lawmakers were pressured to reconsider the treatment of juvenile offenders. But the Nevada Tan meme refused to die. Even years later, online communities would share the iconic sweatshirt image, debating whether Natsumi was a misunderstood kid or a symbol of something darker, or a hero to some, which is really gross. But for Satomi's family, there was nothing ironic or meme worthy about what had happened. They lost a daughter at only 12 years old in a way that no parent should ever have to imagine. I mean, it's sad enough to lose a child, but in this way, in this manner. So I can only imagine how they felt when images of her killer were just circulating the internet. Like it was just some meme. That is garbage human behavior. Like, what the fuck are you doing? A 12-year-old girl was killed. Get it together. So, unfortunately, it continued and nothing could really be done about it. And in the years since, Natsumi's fate has been just shrouded in secrecy, and it has overshadowed Satomi's story and her family's grieving. But still, though, because people are people, they're curious about what happened to Natsumi. And I mean, I can't blame them. I kind of wondered the same thing. I was like, was she rehabilitated? Like, is she doing better now? Does she have empathy? Does she feel bad for what she did? But we don't know because Japanese law prevents the release of her adult identity. Reports about her life after the reformatory are vague at best. Some say that she did reintegrate quietly back into society under a new name. Others believe that she still carries the weight of what she did as a child and has stayed in an institution. And whatever the truth is, the public will likely never know. This case, as well as far too many others like it, stand as a reminder that violence doesn't always come from hardened criminals or adults consumed by rage. Sometimes it comes from the least expected places. The world may never know who Natsumi Tuji is today, but everyone remembers Nevada Tan. And that's not what we want to remember, guys. That is a child who shocked the nation and then became one of the most infamous symbols of evil youth in modern history. But we don't actually know what was going on there. But what really matters in this case, and the only thing we really do know, is that a 12-year-old girl lost her life in a very senseless act of violence and rage. And her poor family has had to go on without her and enduring all of this bullshit. I think, what makes this case so unsettling, aside from the crime itself and the Nevada Tan stuff, is just truly how little we can definitively say about what happened. The details that typically help explain a story, like motives, verified histories, they're all missing or very obscure. And in the absence of answers, people just tend to create them. But sometimes the most honest version of a story is the one that acknowledges its limits. And in telling it, the most important thing we can do is just remember the person at its center, which is Satomi Matari. I really hope that, her family has gotten some kind of closure or found some sort of peace. I can't even imagine losing a child, especially in that manner. Oh my God. Stories like this are so horrible. I think about other stories like this where it's like kids or classmates or friends that end up turning on somebody, and it's just so sad. It's sad for everyone, all around. Families are ruined. It's awful. But that is the story of the Sasebo schoolgirl murder, or at least what we know about it. Very horrific and terrible, which is why I have a fun, weird history fact to cleanse the palate for you. Okay, you ready? I'm just going to jump right into it because there's really no way to segue. So let's talk about history. Today on Shit My History Teacher Never Taught Me is in 18th century England, I don't know why I said England like that. In 18th century England, pineapples were so rare and expensive that most people could not afford to eat one. So naturally, they did the next most logical thing. They rented them. They said, I'll take a nice big juicy pineapple with leather seats. So yeah, most people would just rent pineapples for the evening just to carry it around at parties. Oh, that's just my pineapple. Very casual. But they wouldn't even eat it, you guys. I guess that would defeat the purpose. The goal was to just be seen with it. It was like the 1700s version of holding a designer bag. Some people would even pose for portraits with pineapples just to prove that, they were the tits. They were like, look at me, I got a pineapple. And others displayed them in their homes until they rotted. Yeah, because status over practicality and food, apparently. But this part blew my mind. I was like, how expensive are we talking here? So, you guys, at one point, a single pineapple could cost around $12. In 1700s money, that is roughly the equivalent of $1,000 today. $1,000 for a fucking pineapple. And here I am complaining about gas prices. At least when I buy a pineapple, I can eat it, So I told this fact to my friend and she was like, oh, that's weird. I thought that they were just for swingers. I thought this was going to be about swingers. And I was like, what? She was like, yeah, don't swingers use pineapples as decor to let other people know that they're swingers? I had no words. I said, I don't know. Let's Google it. And turns out, yeah, that's a thing people do. It's usually upside down though. Upside down pineapple is just a little hint that they enjoy the swinging. Which do you, babe? As long as everyone is a consenting party, you enjoy those coconuts or bananas or whatever fruit you enjoy. Okay. It is sort of funny though, in context of this history fact, because back then they were like, hey, look at my pineapple. And now if it's upside down, people are like, hey, so noticed you had a pineapple. Pineapples, man. Who knew? They caused quite the ruckus back then. And these days, they're just a quiet little symbol of what you enjoy in the bedroom. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that palate cleanser. And if you liked this episode, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you know when new episodes are available. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and they alternate between true crime and paranormal. So I got a good spooky episode for you all next week. But if you really like this podcast, share it with a friend and leave a review because those are helpful. You can also follow the podcast wherever you follow things, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. And don't forget to submit your stories for Booze Clues. Those are the listener stories written by you, the listener, and they can be really quite literally about anything you want. But the spookier or crazier, the better. Booze Clues episodes are usually the last Friday of every month, but sometimes it's the first day of the month. It really just depends on how insane my life decides to get. Real talk, April Booze Clues will probably definitely not be the last Friday. That's literally next week. Who am I kidding? It will either be the 30th, which is a Thursday, or May 1st. Most likely May 1st. Stay tuned to find out when Booze Clues is dropping. It will be one of those 2 days. Well, that is all I have for you today. I almost forgot how to end my show. Be good humans. Right now, do it. And remember to trust your lizard brain. Until next time, goodbye.